President Trump is the only person, a single individual, can have the biggest impact on this war, and he hasn't even picked up the phone to Netanyahu to
Oh,
put some
you're
severe
talking about
pressure
the
on.
war in Gaza.
Yes, that's why we're boycotting it, because he's the single person who can have the biggest influence on this.
Peter Dowd, do you think that the Prime Minister does need to really ramp up the pressure on the President to say, look, we supposedly announced this tariff deal, it hasn't been properly implemented, all kinds of different goods, particularly if they contain even bits of steel, are being subjected to some quite significant tariffs, and to say that it's time that he made this actually work?
Well, I'm sure those will be part of the discussions, but we have to put this into the broader context. Trade between the United States and Britain, the UK, is £322 billion, with 208 billion of our exports going over there and 121 billion of their exports coming to us. So in total, it's a big figure. And that's what we've got to sort of concentrate on, the total trade arrangements. And the President of the United States coming here, whoever the President of the United States is, we can't pretend he isn't the President of the United States with the largest economy in the world, with billions of pounds worth of trade, which are affecting and support jobs in this country, and no doubt vice versa. So let's get it into that context without, and I'm not suggesting you're getting into this, but without getting into sort of the political tittle-tattle. That's the sort of conversation the Prime Minister and our trade negotiations will be discussing in the context of that trade sort of arrangements, which is almost 20% of our economy in a sense. So let's our total trade. So let's get it into that context, shall we?
David Simmons, I mean, the government has managed to get a better deal than our European partners. Yes, there is parts of this still to be pinned down, but the government has succeeded in getting a deal which has certainly provided a relief from tariffs for many British businesses.
Peter's absolutely spot on. I agree. Donald Trump, whatever people may think of his politics, is the president, the democratic elected president of our largest ally and incredibly important trading partner, and therefore we should be having good relations with them. And those are opportunities to discuss things where there is disagreement. I know the UK traditionally has been a very major advocate of free trade. Tariffs, we know, go against that, and historically have always been damaging for the economies of everybody, both the country where the tariff is being paid and the country that is paying it. So we know that this move towards greater protectionism is not going to be good. But coming back to the politics, it does reflect some of the concerns that people have, that we've seen with people on these marches saying that they feel that their genuine legitimate concerns have not been addressed. So we've got to make sure that that political conversation is able to happen.
Dr. Danny Chambers, your leader, Sir Ed Davey, has said he's going to boycott this visit. Isn't it a mistake for him to give up the opportunity to make, whatever he felt might be the most significant moment for a Lib Dem leader to make to the US president? I mean, he's not going to have a chance to say anything to him, is he?
Well, I think the reality is, standing in a line of a lot of other dignitaries who get less than 2 seconds with the president's not going to have the impact it needed. And hopefully, being able to take a public stand to raise the issue sort of among both that politicians that will be there, it should. We're in an awful situation where...
Yeah, but I mean, the president's not going to be saying, oh my goodness, where's Ed Davey? Why isn't he here, is he?
No, but we need to push the government to, the Prime Minister to bring this up with him directly, because the Prime Minister can do that. I mean, President Trump is the only person, a single individual, can have the biggest impact on this war, and he hasn't even picked up the phone to Netanyahu to...
Oh, you're talking about the war in Gaza?
Yes, that's why we're, boycotting it, because he's the single person who can have the biggest influence on this, and we need to ensure that the political pressure is put on him to help pull every lever possible to relieve the suffering. And Ed obviously believes that by making a statement of not going, even the fact we're discussing it now, it's been pushed up the political agenda, hopefully it will mean that the Prime Minister will take this very seriously. It'll be one of his main talking points with the President, and it will show how much strength of feeling there is with the British public about this. I've had a lot of emails and letters and people people contact me personally saying they support Ed's stance on this because people feel helpless and they feel the government isn't doing everything it could do, and they certainly know the US isn't doing everything it could do to help relieve the suffering.
Peter Dowd, there is a real risk, isn't there, that the latest revelations about Jeffrey Epstein, the sacking of Lord Mandelson, inevitably means that questions about Epstein are going to be raised, aren't they, and are liable to cause further irritation and potentially embarrassment to the president?
Well, no doubt they will, but we do live in a free country as much as some people don't think we do, and they're the sort of questions that people ask, the press ask in a free country, and sometimes they're uncomfortable, sometimes they're not. But we're all, as politicians, used to being asked uncomfortable questions, and you don't have to be thin-skinned about it. You just have to sort of answer them as constructively as you possibly can, especially when they're asked in good faith. And if things are asked in good faith, a question is asked in good faith, will you answer the question in good faith? So that's where I come from. It's a pretty sort of pragmatic position. And I think, but for people, for me, in my constituents and lots of other constituencies, people want us to deal with structural problems, whether it be the economy, the housing crisis, deficits, the borrowing, the international situation with Ukraine, the Middle East, Sudan. These are the sort of things that we really need to get down to, rather than some of those political, as I used the phrase before, tittle-tattle, which are all very interesting.
Well, you may say it's tittle-tattle, but people are very concerned about the Prime Minister's judgment, aren't they? And they are also going to be raising questions about President Trump's relationship with Epstein. I mean, there is a risk, isn't there, that any joint press appearance gets dominated by questions about Keir Starmer's leadership and Trump's knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein.
It does. What I was trying to say, I'm not suggesting the Epstein stuff is tittle-tattle. I'm just saying in the grand order of things, we have to get it into some sort of context that people aren't asking me about Mandelson on the doorstep, and I've been out on the doorstep today, and people always say, oh, the doorstep, the doorstep. I've been on it today. People are interested in their communities, the NHS and all that sort of stuff. And all I want to do is to say, let's put this into context. And yes, if it comes down to there's an element of judgment, we're back to where we were talking about earlier. Let's get this out into the open. Let's get it sort of transparent. Let's get it out there. I've got no fear of that. We are where we are. Just let's be as open as we can about these sorts of things, but let's concentrate on the issues that are affecting people's lives on a day-to-day basis. Some of the things I've just talked about.
David Simmons, how will you be judging whether this visit is or is not a success?
There are a number of things that are going on. We're all very conscious of what's been happening on NATO's eastern front, that the sense amongst countries there of a concern about Russia testing those borders, testing NATO's resolve. So I think a really clear sense that the United States remains absolutely committed, that it is going to support Ukraine, it is going to continue to work as it has done historically with its allies in Europe. That's going to be really significant. Some progress around the trade deals, that recognition that there is definitely some work to be done to build on that. I think that will be a real positive. And also, I think just a restatement that in what feels like a very uncertain world, where a lot of people are quite anxious about things that are going on, that we and the United States, as two very long-standing allies, continue to work together and to walk in lockstep, because we know that we've got so much in common, and that if we work together, we will be so much better at addressing the concerns that both of our sets of people have in their day-to-day lives.
Danny Chambers, we know that the Prime Minister, that the President is bringing over with him some of his friends who are the big bosses of some of the tech industries there in the United States. He's looking not just for more tech deals, but also for an easing up of some of the rules and regulations on social media and the taxation of tech companies. Do you think there's a problem with industry leaders like this being invited to the palace where they'll have this chance to presumably make their point?
Well, we do desperately want these deals. We want this sort of trade. We know that this tech is the future is going to affect how we do business and how we socialize. But as the mental health spokesperson, one of the things I hear most is how people are struggling to access mental health care for their children. And when you speak to teachers, you hear how children's mental health issues and anxiety and body image issues have shot through the roof. And we desperately need to have better mental health care for children, which means that we have to ensure that children cannot access these social media platforms until they are an appropriate age. And we have to ensure they cannot access dangerous content until they are an appropriate age. And we have to also make sure that we can fund treatment for children with social media, problems caused by social media and these tech giants. And it's not unreasonable to expect them to help fund that with a digital services tax. So while we desperately want to ensure we have some really good trade deals, we cannot do that at the expense of being able to protect children online and to also fund children's mental health. And
Doctor, we'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. We're out of time. Dr. Danny Chambers, David Simmons and Peter Dowd, thank you all so much.